The morning began like any other for Cole Maddox, a solitary cowboy who preferred the company of wind, cattle, and distant horizons to people. His ranch sat miles from the nearest town, tucked between rolling prairies and a slow-moving creek. Life had taught him to survive with little and expect even less. So when he noticed a broken wagon in the distance, tilted, abandoned, and oddly still, it caught his attention in a way few things did. Cole approached cautiously, his horse stepping through dry grass. At first he saw no movement, and he wondered if whoever had been traveling with the wagon had walked off looking for help. But then a soft cough, thin and trembling, carried across the prairie. Cole dismounted and moved closer, hand near his holster. Not out of aggression, but caution. Trouble came in many shapes out here. Beside the wrecked wagon sat a boy of about 10, clutching a threadbare blanket around his shoulders. His face was pale from hunger and exhaustion, but his eyes, alert, intelligent, followed Cole with a mix of hope and fear. A few feet behind him, leaning against a wheel, sat an elderly woman. Her gray hair was neatly pinned, her posture dignified even in her weariness. She looked up at Cole with calm eyes and offered a faint, polite nod. "Ma'am," Cole greeted quietly. "You two in need of help." The boy didn't speak, but the woman managed a tired smile. "Our horses bolted last night. We've been stranded since dawn, I'm afraid. Neither of us can walk far." There was something refined about her tone. Educated, practiced completely out of place in the rough prairie. Cole noticed she wore a travel coat made of high-quality fabric. Though dirt and dust had muted its color, even the boy beneath his worn clothing carried himself with a strange steadiness. Not the usual kind of travelers one met so far from the main road. But Cole wasn't one to interrogate. Misfortune didn't need questioning. It needed kindness. "You're welcome to come stay at my place," he said simply. "A warm meal, a safe place to rest." The boy's eyes widened, and for the first time since Cole arrived, relief flickered across his face. The woman exhaled shakily as if she had been holding her breath for hours. "That is incredibly kind of you," she murmured. "Just for a night." "If you don't mind," Cole helped them onto his horse, walking beside it as they rode the short distance back to his ranch. The sun was dipping low, painting the plains in gold, and, for a moment, the scene felt almost peaceful. Three strangers traveling together as if it were natural inside the ranch house. Cole set out water and bread while heating a kettle over the fire. The boy ate quietly, though politely, and the woman who introduced herself as Evelyn thanked Cole repeatedly, her words gentle and precise. She explained only that they'd been traveling to visit a distant friend and had been ambushed on the trail, losing their horses in the process. Something about that story didn't sit right. Cole wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the boy's calmness, or Evelyn's refined composure in such dire conditions. Maybe it was the gold-trimmed pocket watch she tried to hide in her coat, far too fine for ordinary travelers. Cole wasn't the sort to pry people had secrets, and secrets had reasons. All he knew was this: two vulnerable souls were under his roof tonight, and despite his loner nature, he felt a quiet pull of sense that their arrival was no accident, and that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. The ranch had not felt this alive. Years. Cole Maddox was a man accustomed to silence, the kind that clung to the faith walls and wrapped itself around his meals, his evenings, his thoughts. So, when he awoke the next morning to the faint sound of voices, soft, careful, almost musical, it took him a moment to remember he had guests, Evelyn and Daniel. He stepped into the main room to find the elderly woman already awake, sitting near the fire with a cup of warm tea he'd set out the night before, even in simple clothes. Even with dust still lingering at the edge of her sleeves, she radiated a quiet dignity. She stood slowly when Cole entered. "Good morning, Mr. Maddox," she said, inclining her head. "Thank you again. I don't believe we could have survived another night out there." Cole shook his head. "It's just breakfast and a roof." "Ma'am, anyone would have done the same." But Evelyn smiled as though she didn't believe that at all. The boy. Daniel sat at the small wooden table, studying the grain of the wood with an intensity unusual for a child his age. He whispered a shy good morning before lowering his gaze again for all his quietness. There was something measured about him, an awareness in the way he observed everything. Cole had seen plenty of boys, but none quite like this one breakfast with simple eggs, biscuits, and a bit of cured ham. But Evelyn treated it as though she'd been served a feast. Daniel ate with polite restraint. Though hunger glimmered beneath the surface, Cole could tell he was holding back. Too proud or too well trained to look desperate. "You two were traveling far?" Cole asked gently, not wanting to push too hard. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Daniel before replying. "Yes, farther than we anticipated." Her answer was polite, but vague, too vague. Cole noticed again the expensive pocket watch she kept tucked, carefully beneath her sleeve, its chain glinting faintly whenever she moved. He noticed Daniel's speech clear, articulate, educated. These were not everyday settlers. Travelers did not wear gold-trimmed watches or speak with such refinement, and they certainly didn't end up abandoned on the edge of nowhere without a strong reason. But Cole kept his questions to himself. He wasn't a man who pried. Life had taught him to respect silence just as much as honesty still. He felt to pull something about them, fragile yet composed. Grateful he had guarded stirred a long, unused instinct within him. Protection, responsibility. Ranch had been empty of family for so long that he barely recognized what that feeling meant. After breakfast, Cole stepped outside to milk the cow and check the fences to his surprise. Daniel followed. "Can I help?" the boy asked, standing stiffly as if afraid he would be turned away. Cole raised a brow. "You ever milked a cow before?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sir, but I can learn." There it was again, that poised, disciplined tone, not the voice of a farm child, but of someone raised under strict guidance. Cole handed him a small stool. Daniel tried, failed, tried again, and by the third attempt managed a thin but steady stream into the bucket. His grin, small but real, made something warm flicker in Cole's chest inside. Evelyn watched them through the window, her expression softening. A grandmother who had carried fear for too long was finally seeing a moment of comfort for the boy she loved as the day unfolded. Subtle truths revealed themselves not through words, but through details. The way Daniel read fluently from one of Cole's old books. The way Evelyn's posture straightened when discussing anything related to business or property. The way both of them flinched at the sound of distant hooves. Refinement wrapped in fair grace, wrapped in grief. And beneath all of it, a secret call felt it in his bones. These two were not just lost travelers. They were running from something bigger than he could yet imagine, and without knowing why. Cole found himself silently making a decision. As long as they were under his roof, he would keep them safe. The second day should have been peaceful. The skies were clear, the air warm, and for a brief moment, Cole allowed himself to believe that Evelyn and Daniel's troubles ended when he brought them to his ranch. But even good days can carry the smell of oncoming storms. And by noon, Cole sensed something shifting in the wind. Daniel spent the morning tending to the chickens. Trying hard to mimic Cole's every move, Evelyn sorted herbs on the porch, her hand steady yet tense. As though her mind wandered to places she wanted to forget, Cole watched her for a moment, noting the faraway look in her eyes, the look of someone who had lost more than she was willing to speak about. He was chopping wood when the first warning arrived. Hoof beats fast. Heavy, purposeful Cole straightened, his jaw tightening. Travelers rarely rode with such force unless they carried intentions sharper than courtesy. He wiped his hands on his trousers and stepped onto the porch just as two riders appeared on the horizon, dust swirling behind them like a warning banner. Evelyn's face drained of color. Daniel froze. "You know them?" Cole asked quietly. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't have to fear answered for her. The riders pulled up in front of the house. Both men were armed. Both wore expressions of practiced intimidation. One had a scar running across his cheek. The other was younger, but with eyes cold and calculating mourning, Cole called. Keeping his voice, Even the scarred man tipped his hat in a mock gesture. "We're looking for a pair that ran off. Older woman, young boy. They owe some debts. Seen anybody pass through?" Daniel pressed closer to Evelyn's side. Cole noticed. So did the writers, but neither of them looked back toward the porch. Evelyn kept her face composed, but her hand trembled slightly. "What kind of debts?" Cole asked casually. "That's none of your concern." The younger writer snapped. "Just tell us if you've seen them." Cole let a long, silent stretch. He measured the men, their twitchy hands, their arrogance, the restless horses. These weren't debt collectors. These were hunters. And the people they hunted were standing just inches behind him. "No," Cole said finally. "Ain't seen anyone but cattle the last 2 days." Scarface narrowed his eyes, studying Cole's expression. Then he looked toward the barn, the porch, the land beyond. "We need to look around," he said, "just to be sure." Cole stepped forward, blocking their path. "My land, my rules. You can turn around now." The younger man's hand slid toward his gun, but Scarface raised a hand, stopping him. "Easy," he murmured. Though his gaze remained sharp. "Didn't mean to cause trouble. We'll be keeping an eye out." Though the threat was clear as they rode off, Evelyn collapsed onto a chair. Her face pale and drawn, Cole waited until the riders disappeared behind the ridge. Before turning to her, "Ma'am," he said gently, "it's time you told me the truth. Those men weren't after money." Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing shakily when she opened them. Grief shimmered behind her composure. "No," she whispered. "They are after my grandson." Daniel's small hand clutched her sleeve. Cole remained silent, letting her speak. "My son Daniel's father was murdered by businessmen who wanted control of our cattle empire," she said, her voice cracking. "When they could not force us to sign over ownership, they turned violent. They want Daniel because he is the last Harrington heir." Harrington. The name hit Cole like a blow. Everyone in the territory knew it. Wealth, influence, power. But the worn-out woman before him didn't look like royalty. She looked like a grandmother fighting for her family. Cole knelt beside. "Daniel, you're safe here," he said firmly. "And I won't let anyone take you." Daniel trembled, but nodded for the first time since they arrived. Evelyn allowed herself to break tears, slipped down her wrinkled cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole looked toward the ridge where the riders disappeared. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. Trouble had found his ranch, and now he realized with cold certainty he would have to stand between it and the family fate had placed in his care. The truth changed everything. And yet, strangely, it changed nothing at all for Cole Maddox. He wasn't a man who cared for wealth or reputation, cattle empires, business deals, the politics of influence. Those belonged to a world far removed from his dusty, quiet ranch. But the moment Evelyn Harrington revealed her identity and the danger chasing her grandson, Cole felt the old familiar weight settle over his shoulders. Responsibility, duty, protection, things he had once lived by and had nearly forgotten. The ranch became a place of whispered strategy and cautious movements. Evelyn suggested leaving at dawn. But her exhaustion was obvious. Her hand shook when she poured tea, and her breath hitched whenever she climbed the steps. Daniel, despite his brave front, hadn't slept well in days. Running now would only break them further. "You stay." Cole insisted. "At least until you get your strength back." Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She saw it in his eyes. The certainty, the quiet strength, the promise he didn't speak aloud because he didn't need to. She nodded. As days passed, a new routine emerged. One forged not from calm, domestic life, but from silent preparation. Cole began teaching Daniel skills he'd need to survive. Not just how to ride or mend a fence, but how to read danger in the wind, how to recognize tracks, how to handle fear. Daniel soaked it all in. Eager, desperate, willing to learn anything that made his grandmother safer, Cole saw a familiar fire, and the boy, one he had once carried himself before loss, dulled its edges. "You're quicker than I thought," Cole remarked one afternoon as Daniel managed to saddle a horse properly on his own. Daniel's cheeks flushed with pride. "I just don't want to be weak." Cole rested a hand on his shoulder. "Being strong ain't about fists or guns. It's about protecting the people who matter." Daniel nodded. He understood far more than any child should. Meanwhile, inside the house, Evelyn slowly allowed herself to exhale. The ranch offered something she had not felt in weeks. Security Cole's unspoken watchfulness, his constant awareness of the land, and his effortless command over the environment made her feel protected in a way guards and gates never had. One evening, she prepared tea while Cole sat at the table repairing a broken spur. The lantern flickered, casting warm light across the room. "You remind me of my son," Evelyn said quietly. Cole's hand stilled. He didn't look up. "He was a good man." "I reckon. The best," she whispered. A tremor entered her voice. "They killed him because he refused to bow to greed. And now they come for Daniel." Cole finally met her gaze. Her grief hung between them, raw, unmasked, powerful. He understood it too well. The loss of family was a wound that never healed, only softened over time. "I won't let them near him." Cole said simply. Evelyn studied him. This solitary cowboy with a guarded heart and steady hands, and something softened inside her. Not admiration, not gratitude, something deeper trust, real aching trust. Day by day, Cole's quiet ranch transformed into a small bastion of hope. He reinforced the barn doors, repaired the fences, checked the creek trails, and made sure every entrance was secure, not out of fear, but readiness. The kind that settles into a man who has lived through storm after storm. Daniel followed him like a shadow. Evelyn found comfort in his presence, and Cole, unaccustomed to family, to conversation, to warmth, found himself drawn into their world more than he expected. Late one night, as the wind whispered across the plains, Cole stood outside, staring into the darkness. The horizon looked peaceful. But he knew better. Their enemies wouldn't give up. Danger was coming. Not in weeks. But soon still he didn't flinch. Because the moment Evelyn and Daniel stepped into his life, they became part of something he thought he'd lost forever, a family worth fighting for. The peace that had slowly settled over Eli's ranch shatters the moment the long-rumored threat finally makes. Itself known for weeks, Deal had sensed something brewing. Mr. Greers's visit, the mysterious riders too, close to the fences, the unease in the boy's eyes whenever unfamiliar horses appeared on the horizon. Now as the sky darkens and a real storm rolls in, the trouble that has been creeping closer finally arrives in full force. It begins with thunder deep, rolling a warming tremor across the plains. The cattle stir restlessly and the horses in the barn stamp their hooves. The boy Daniel stands by the window, watching the wind bend the tall grass beside him. His grandmother Margaret rests in her chair. But for the first time, Eli sees worry in her usually calm eyes. She knows what's coming. She may have hoped to avoid it, but she knew it was inevitable because the men pursuing them are not ordinary thieves or opportunists. They are men who used to work for the family's estate, hired hands who turned greedy when they realized the family was gone and the fortune was unguarded. Most believed the wealthy widow and her grandson had perished in a fire months earlier. And those who didn't were hunting them to secure access to the family lands and vaults if Daniel and Margaret lived. They stood in the way of many men's ambitions. Now those men have tracked them to Eli's ranch. As the storm clouds gather, Eli goes out to secure the barn doors. But before he finishes, he spots movement along the fence line. Half a dozen riders, their coats whipping in the rising wind, their silhouettes sharp against the lightning-lit sky. It is no coincidence they waited for a storm for cover for a moment when the ranch would be most vulnerable. while Eli moves, quickly ushering Margaret and Daniel into the cellar beneath the kitchen. Margaret tries to argue. She does not want to hide like prey, but Eli tells her firmly that keeping Daniel safe is the priority. She finally nods, pressing a trembling hand to Eli's arm before descending the steps outside. Rain begins to fall in violent sheets. The writers dismount and spread out. They shout threats, false promises, and bargains offering money land. Anything for Daniel and Margaret's location. Eli steps out onto the porch, shotgun in hand. Calm despite the fury of the storm around him, he tells them plainly, "Nobody is leaving with anyone from this ranch." The confrontation escalates quickly. The men try forcing the barn doors open, searching for hidden wagons or belongings. Thunder cracks overhead as Eli fires a warning shot into the air when the men surge forward. He fires again, this time to stop them. Not warned, the ranch becomes chaos, shouting, hooves pounding, the storm growing fiercer with each passing minute. Daniel, trembling in the cellar, hears the gunfire and tries to climb the stairs to help. Margaret holds him back, whispering, "That man is fighting for you. Trust him. That's the bravest thing we can do right now." Outside, the wind tears across the yard as Eli defends the ranch alone. He is outnumbered, but he knows the land better than any of them. He uses the storm to his advantage, slipping between buildings. Drawing their fire away from the house, the riders begin to realize they've underestimated him. Then, in one decisive moment, after a failed attempt to rush the porch, the men retreat, regrouping near the fence line with lightning illuminating their faces. Eli sees fear in their eyes. They realize the ranch is no easy target. The storm breaks both in the sky and in the conflict. But Eli knows this is only the beginning. The men will return. And next time, they will not come in the rain. They will come prepared yet. As he returns to the cellar and finds Daniel and Margaret safe, something settles in Eli's heart for the first time. Clears throat. He understands exactly what he is fighting for. The danger had passed, leaving behind the quiet hum of a prairie evening. The storm that had raged through the ranch and threatened everything Cole Maddox held dear was over, and with it came the relief of survival and the promise of a fresh beginning inside the cabin. The warmth of the fire spread through the room. Chasing away the chill of the recent turmoil, Cole sat on a worn wooden chair. Daniel asleep in his grandmother Evelyn's lap, the boy's chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm for the first time in weeks. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, now felt alive in a way it never had before. Cole had spent years alone, his days measured by the rising sun, the care of cattle, and the rhythm of labor. But the presence of Evelyn and Daniel had changed all that. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It had become a home filled with small, meaningful interactions. Daniel asking for guidance on chores, Evelyn preparing meals with quiet diligence, and Cole finding himself genuinely looking forward to shared moments. The chaos of the storm had not only tested their strength, it had solidified a bond that was stronger than any threat outside their walls. Evelyn, once wary and reserved, had begun to relax under the steady protection Cole provided. She now moved about the cabin with a quiet confidence, her eyes no longer clouded with fear. The boy, too, had grown not only in skill, learning to ride and care for the animals, but in trust, feeling the assurance that came from knowing someone would always stand beside him through these shared trials. Cole had come to see them not just as guests or charges, but as a family, unexpected, yes, but real in every meaningful sense. The next morning, the trio rode out to survey the land. The prairies stretched endlessly before them, golden in the dawnlight. Dotted with the silhouettes of cattle and the occasional grazing horse, it was a landscape both harsh and forgiving. Much like the life they had navigated together, Daniel rode with a sense of pride and capability. Evelyn at his side, and Cole guiding them gently from the back. They were not just survivors of a storm. They were participants in a life forged through courage, trust, and unity in the weeks that followed. Evelyn officially reclaimed her family's estate wealth and power had returned to her hands. Yet she made it clear that Cole was not to be treated as a mere employee or distant acquaintance. Instead, he was invited into the fold not for his connection to money, but for the loyalty, protection, and care he had shown when it mattered most. It was a gesture that surprised Cole, yet it felt right. His life had been one of solitude, but in this unexpected family, he found purpose beyond the boundaries of his ranch. Daniel, once frightened and unsure, now thrived under the guidance of both Cole and Evelyn. He learned lessons of courage and compassion, as well as practical skills for managing both land and people in the safety of their care. He blossomed into a boy capable of carrying forward a legacy far larger than himself, a legacy built not on fear or power alone, but on the love and strength of those who stood beside him one evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the prairie with soft hues of gold and pink, the three of them sat together on the porch. The quiet was no longer empty. It was filled with the promise of new beginnings. Cole looked at Evelyn and Daniel, understanding that the life he had once imagined for himself, isolated, simple, and solitary, was nothing compared to the richness of connection he now felt together. They had endured storms, faced danger, and claimed victory not through wealth or weapons, but through resilience, courage, and loyalty. The Harrington estate would continue stronger and wiser than before. With Cole now a cornerstone of its foundation, he had discovered that family is not defined by blood or fortune, but by the actions we take, the love we give, and the choices we make when facing the storms of life. In this shared survival, this rebuilt home, and the trust between them, a new legacy was born, one forged from hardship, tempered by love, and destined to endure far beyond the horizon of any single life.